going to be talking about Docker, Git, and Mura. Specifically, the big part of this is obviously Docker. The thing that's most important to take away from this is Docker is not just another tool or another piece of technology that you could or couldn't use, right? It is something that you need to get familiar with. The industry is going there, whether you like it or not, right? So it's sort of like, hey, one day I had to know what FTP was, right? You will need to know what Docker is, but don't worry, guys. So first, before I jump into this, the quick obligatory slide. I'm Greg, San Diego, yada yada yada, and I've been working on Docker stuff for about the last 3 years. So I became aware of Docker in 2014 and got excited and spent 18 months of spinning up little Hello World things. And I think I rolled out my first production site on Docker in production in 2015. Just my own personal sort of website for a buddy kind of thing, right? And then as of January of this year, 1024, which is the company that does Slatwall, the company that I work for, we have, I don't know how many projects, but we have very big projects, lots of websites, all deployed on Docker, in AWS, on the cloud, totally scalable, it's awesome, right? So that's my experience with Docker. And then the next thing, this is always the first question that comes up on any talk about Docker, right? What is Docker? And Eddie, I'm sorry if I'm about to blow you away.
Yeah, right, I just cut out like half my presentation.
Yeah,
it's good stuff.
No, it's good, right? So what's Docker, right? And then we talk about what's a container? And wait, what about servers? And wait, is that like a VM? Right? And we could go through this whole thing, but the truth is, it doesn't matter. You don't need to know any of that, okay? I'm going to show you why. That's it. That's my whole presentation. The rest is all going to be demo, and it's going to be extremely exciting. Let me get out of here. Okay, so I got a project, right? So I want to launch a Mura site, and I want to work on that Mura site as a team. So if anybody here wants to follow along with me, I have nothing installed on my machine. I have no Cold Fusion, no Lucy, nothing installed on my machine. You can go to this repository on GitHub, Greg Moser, Mura Docker project. Scroll down and read the README. Okay? And this is how all projects should really be thought of and set up as, right? Because if you're somebody who wants to work on a project, it should be as simple as this, right? So the first step is to install Docker for Mac or Windows. Okay, I cheated a little bit. I do have Docker for Mac already installed on my machine. It is, you can't quite see it because it's cutting it off, but there's a little whale icon up here with these cute little containers on its back. And this says Docker's running, I can restart it. You never need to touch this thing. Once you start it, it's running, forget about it, right? It's in the background. So just install that thing. Then you need to install Git, either GUI or command line tool. I'm super lazy, and I use GitHub's desktop, right? It's that simple, right? So you don't have Git installed, install it right now. It takes about 2 seconds, right? And the next step is just clone this repository, right? So you clone this repository, you can do that, just come up here, right? Clone or download. You can open it in desktop, etc. So I'm going to do this right now. So let's see, in GitHub desktop, I come in here, I clone, I do Mura Docker project, okay, clone Mura Docker project. Where do I want to clone it into? I want to clone it into my projects folder. Great. Okay, so it is going up to GitHub. It is cloning down these files. Is everybody here familiar with Git? For the most part? Is anybody here not familiar with Git? Great. Oh man. There goes half the presentation. No, it's okay. Git is a very small piece of this. The important thing to note about Git is really Git's the process by which you just move this stuff around, right? All you need is Git. That's it. You don't need anything else. And then you need Docker for Mac. So this is almost there. This is just so you guys know, this is a bold demo decision here. I'm doing everything on the fly, right? This might go completely haywire. We don't know. We'll find out. Okay, so I've got my project cloned down now. If I look in my projects folder, here it is. I've got my Mura Docker project folder that I cloned down. And this is a fresh project. I haven't started anything on it yet. This repository is meant to get you guys started. Okay. All right, so let's go back to reading. What does it tell me to do next? Okay, I got to go into this project directory, and then I got to start the project. Docker compose up. Okay, great. So let's go do that. So I can open up my favorite flavor text editor here, Atom. Let me add my project folder of Mura Docker project. Fantastic. Let me move that to the top because that's what we're talking about right now. Okay, great. Atom has this awesome little terminal thing built in, and it told me to run docker compose up. But before I do that, just to make sure you guys realize there's no smoke and mirrors going on here, if I open up my system preferences, I do have MySQL installed. It is not running, okay? This could not be installed on my machine. I don't need it. I don't need anything installed on my machine, right? This is a brand new Mac, could be, right? And also, so there's no smoke and mirrors, I have nothing running on localhost. There's no Apache server, there's nothing. It's just a dead computer, right? Fantastic. Okay, Docker compose up. Okay, wow. Interesting. Bunch of logs. Okay, let's go back to the README and figure out what the next step is here. At this point, you should be able to see default pages on localhost. Huh, look at that, up and running. Fantastic. That was really easy. It took us, I don't know, we're like 8 minutes into this presentation, and we're up and running right away. That is fantastic. Thank you. All right, great. So now that we're up and running, let's talk about what we really just did here, right? So you guys can see this. But the importance of that process that I just went through, right? And the reason why Docker is so important is this is a brand new Mura install, but this could have easily been a project that we've been working on for 3 years that's got tons of data in it, and the setup process is still the same. So if you're an organization that has to onboard new developers ever, like you hire new people, and then it's like, oh, I gotta install this thing and install that thing, and I gotta set up run, and I gotta don't do any of that anymore, right? Your project should be this easy for a new developer to get started on, and they're not that complicated. So let's look at what is in this project so that you guys can see it. So let me see if I can bump this up here a little bit. Oh, no, that's not good. Can you guys see the left-hand side here okay? Big enough-ish? Mm-hmm. Okay, great. So that Docker compose up, right, that's a native Docker function, and it uses this Docker compose YAML file, okay? And what this Docker compose YAML file has described is 2 services. Fantastic. Okay, so the first service that I described was Mura, right? It's going to run on in this particular instance, it's running on Lucy. So one of the services I need up and running is Mura, right? And then the other service that I need up and running is MySQL, okay? Because I'm going to need a database to work with my application, right? Mura needs a database to run on. So I'm going to need to spin up a local version of MySQL so I can do this development work here. You know, there's a lot of environment variables in here. These are sort of just handoffs so that I can tell my Mura service how to run, right? So, okay, wait a minute, this is crazy, you know, how does this all work? It's just like some text in a version file, or in a YAML file. What does it all mean? The most important part of this, under these services that I've defined, is this build identifier. And you'll notice here on the build, I've got services Mura, and then here on this build, I've got services MySQL, okay? So the way to think about services, probably the easiest way to think about services, just think of them like they're their own server. They're not, but pretend like they are, right? You get a full operating system. It's like it's a container that it runs in, but they basically are like servers, right? So how did I just spin up 2 servers? Because I cloned this repo, right? And I cloned this repo on bad Wi-Fi, right? I think the whole repo size is maybe, I don't even know how big it is. Let's see. I think it's only like maybe a megabyte, right? What do we got here? What? 74, oh, Mura is huge. That's right, all those images. All right, 74 megs, it's just Mura, right? So how does this work, and how do I have my project set up? Well, this is a convention that I've come up with over the years of working on Docker that I think works really, really well. And that is to define a services folder. And every folder that you put in here is like a server, right? I have my Mura server and I have my MySQL server here, right? So if I open up the Mura server, I'm going to start using the word container now, just so that way anybody who watches this doesn't think of me as an idiot. All right, so I'm going to open up my Mura container, right? And this contains everything, all of the information for Mura to run. And what describes how this container runs is in this Docker file. Oops, comment from an old bill, delete that, nobody saw it, fantastic. Okay, so what I've done here is this file tells me how to run. So it says, let's go out and let's grab the latest Lucy container, because there is a default stock Lucy container that they put out, right? And then here's who the person who's going to maintain this, and then here's all of the stuff that I want to do against that container to make it more me-ish, right? To make it more run the way that I want it to, okay? And the way that I set up my folder structure here is I actually just mirror the folder structure that a server would have, right? But I don't need all the files from the server because it knows how to go out based upon this Lucy 4 and get all that stuff. The only thing I need are to copy over the things that are unique to me. So this is not even running Apache or anything like that, right? And so we can open up this opt Lucy server. I do this whole folder structure so that I can remember, right, where in this container these files actually end up living. But the only thing that I keep here is a small subset of the files that I need. They're just the files I need to override, right? So this is like my Lucy web that's got some stuff in it. Okay, cool. The other thing that I've done to make Lucy a little bit cooler is I've added this entry point down here. And entry points just run when the container boots up, okay? And my entry point file is over here in this user local entry point. And this is a cool little script that I wrote that allows you to pass in environment variables for databases and your Lucy credentials, and it figures out how to hash all that stuff. But the point is, you don't have to do any of this, right? I did it for you, you're good to go, right? But that's how this is working. So that's the container. If we go back here and look at the terminal, when I ran that Docker compose up, all these logs that we saw before, these are just the outputs of both of those containers. So I got a lot of outputs from my MySQL container, and then I got a bunch of outputs from my Mura container, right? Because these are all like the standard sort of JVM set up the output stuff, right? And then one of the things I have in here, the real meat and potatoes of this service, is in the var www folder, where I just went out and got a vanilla instance of Mura and dropped it in here. This could be any application. This is just default Lucy. It points to this folder, so I just put the stuff there, right? Nice and easy. Okay. So those are my two services. And okay, so those are my two services. They're up and running. Fantastic. This is a really, really simple example, right? All I have is a database and a JVM running. But they can be more complex. So the first site I ever did was for my buddy who's got a real estate company. And he had this real estate search feature, like like find your home, right? We pretend like we're Zillow. So he had a search feature, and we wanted it to run really, really fast. So I said, hey, let's also set up Elasticsearch, right? Okay, great. So on that project, I have Mura, MySQL, and an Elasticsearch container. Okay. The other thing I wanted to describe too, just bouncing back up here really quickly about this MySQL container. If you look at this Docker file, I'm doing nothing. I'm just like, get me this version of MySQL and run on that, right? Because MySQL container is already ready to go to do everything that I needed to do. The guys over at MySQL hooked us up. They're like, yo, it's good to go. You don't need to do anything. You just use it vanilla. Similar sort of thing for Elasticsearch here. Elasticsearch just, there's a container for it. It's up on Docker Hub. You just put it in here and you're good to go, right? So there's a whole plethora of all the applications and all the tools we already use that are containerized sitting up in what's called Docker Hub, which we're going to talk about here in a second. So this is an example of a slightly more complicated one, right? But still a single project with a single set of source code here, okay? There is another project, which is this is our 1024 DevOps project, okay? It's structured very similarly, except since we work on lots of projects at the same time and we end up using the same resources, we wanted to set it up so we could run projects side by side with just different host names, right? So we broke the project information out into its own folder, right? So these are each individual projects that we work on. And then there was a lot of services that our developers need to use to get their jobs done on a daily basis, right? Because there's more than just Cold Fusion and MySQL, right? So we run Apache, we run the AWS CLI because we push stuff to and from AWS. So I needed that command line tool. I'm not gonna install it on my machine. I'm just gonna, guess what? There's an AWS CLI container already there that you can use, right? So my AWS CLI container, all of our versions of Cold Fusion, Adobe Cold Fusion, 9, 10, 11, we would need to run Elasticsearch, Lucy, and MySQL because Slatwell we need to test across all of these various platforms and that kind of stuff, right? So we need to push and pull these things together, but everything is here, right? So if you run Gulp or whatever, any Node application or whatever, right? There's no reason to ever install Node on your machine, right? And the reason you don't want to install Node on your machine, right, is because at the end of the day, you want your project to be this simple to get started, right? Because somebody who comes in and starts working on this project can be like, look, I've never even heard of Node before. I don't know what it is or how to use it or whatever. Forget about it, right? The project should be set up in a way that it can just run itself, right? So that's the reason that we're doing this, is to make it really quick and easy to onboard new developers. Okay. You know what? I'm not even going to go to that. That'll take us down a page. Just easy to do. Okay, fantastic. So I've got my local Mura instance up and running here on localhost. I could fill out this information, connect to the database, and we'd be off to the races, right? In fact, if I come here, we can also see that I can pull up my Lucy server, dev not secure. Okay, boom, you know, it already has my data source set up to talk to Mura. It's good to go, right? Because as part of my sort of configuration, like my Git project contains all the configuration stuff that I need to set up data sources, set up SMTP or whatever it might be, right? So that's all here, fantastic. Okay, now I don't want to just run this site on localhost. I want to be able to deploy this website, right? There are 1,000 ways to deploy with Docker, right? If you go and look on any cloud provider now, there'll be like 6,000 examples of how to deploy Docker on their infrastructure. If you look at any continuous integration tool, there's like 6,000 examples of how to get up and running with Docker and make it work. I'm going to show you guys the simplest way to do it, and we're going to be up and running on AWS here in hopefully before my time expires. So, first to start with, this is just my Greg Moser. It's actually my wife and my account, so I had to go on the free tier, otherwise she'll be upset. And so I got no running instances. There's nothing on my Amazon account. I've got no database instances yet. That's fine. I've got no containers, nothing. So the first thing I need to do, I've got my project here, and it's in Git. The first thing I need to do is I need to, every time I push to that Git repo, I want it to build up my services for me, right? My containers. I want it to do that for me automatically, right? So it's really easy to do that. And in this example, right, the two things that we're talking about here are just Mura and MySQL, right? MySQL I don't need to turn into a container. And the reason I don't need to turn MySQL, or I don't need to deploy MySQL. And the reason I don't need to deploy MySQL is because there's an RDS. Because Amazon's got this way better version called RDS, and it does a lot of cool stuff for me, so I can just go create an RDS database and use it as is. I don't need to do anything special. I do, however, need to take all of my source files and package those up into a container and deploy those, right? So as part of this Docker file too, right, we are copying over into, we're copying our source files into the container, right? So what I want to do is I want to create, okay, so this is hub.docker.com. You go in there, you create an account. I think you can even create your account with your GitHub account. Super easy to do. And remember, like, everything is here. So if I just come to, like, explore, I mean, there's, like, guys, everything. Anything and everything you ever need, it's all here, right? So look no further. Oops. Wait, I can do that. this so I can recreate it. Delete. This. Delete. Fantastic. I did do a little trial run to make sure I wasn't going to totally bomb. And okay, so I come in here and I want to create an automated build. And I want to create an automated build from GitHub, because that's where my code lives. Okay? And I can pick my Greg Moser account, and I'll look for my Mura Docker project. Okay? So this is what I'm gonna create here. I'm gonna leave it as public so you guys can see it. And I'm actually gonna call this not just the Mura Docker project, but the container I'm creating is specifically the Mura container, right? Because if my application had lots of different services, I would want to maybe create automatically build multiple services. Okay. Short description, awesome sauce. Okay. The next thing you want to do is just click here to customize the behavior. A lot of the way that Docker is set up is like you're supposed to put your Docker file, and you're not supposed to. A lot of people end up with their Docker files in their root repository, and we'll go through some examples of that here in a second. But for this particular instance, what we're saying is, I want to listen on the master branch on GitHub to the services Mura directory, which, if you remember, services Mura, that's where my Docker file lives, that describes how my Mura service runs. So master services Mura, and we'll call this production, right? Now think about this for a second. Okay. So I can make it so that if I push to master, it will create a container, and that container will be tagged as production. If I push to staging, it'll create a container, and that container will be tagged as staging. Right? Or I could just leave this blank and say, you know what? When I tag something in Git, right? So when I tag, because GitHub or Git allows you to tag things, right? You can tag your branches. When I tag it, just go ahead and create a container that's named the same as my tag, right? Version 3.2.6, great, right? It'll spin up a container and create that as a tag, right? And when I say branch, I can say, you know what? Every branch I put to create a container in Docker Hub with the same name as that branch. So I can be working on my changes or whatever, do a branch, right? And it's going to create that branch as its own individual container. And when we talk about these tags, where those tags get used are right here. It's when you describe your containers. And in a second here, when we get looking at our production deployment here, the image that we're using, right, is going to be the Greg Moser Mura Docker project _ Mura production container. That's what we're going to want to deploy on our production node. So great. So master we're going to have automatically do as production, and I can just go ahead and create this. Awesome. I can come into build details, build settings, and since I didn't just push right now, I'm just going to come in here and trigger a build so that this happens. It should take you guys like no time to set up. Right? Great, that's building. I can come over here to build details. You can see it building here, right? But from this point forward, every time I push to master, it's just going to rebuild this thing, right? The next thing I need to do is I need to go, there's another tool that Docker provides that's super easy to use, and it's called Docker Cloud, right? These are just a really good way to get up and running. Now, down the road, you may decide you want to use a CI environment or something like that. We can talk through some of those more complex examples. But for right now, let's just get up and running, right? Vanilla, let's give you guys something to do when you go home. So the one thing I did to this Docker Cloud is I have already connected it to my AWS account that we looked at before. You can connect this Docker Cloud tool to any cloud provider, okay? When you go to connect these things, there is it is like super. You can connect. I guess my point in saying this is you can. Right. So I don't want to connect DigitalOcean, but it's like there's instructions. It takes like 2 seconds. It's point click, right? It's super easy. So I've already done that because it's kind of a boring process, and it's connected to my my wife and my Amazon account. All right. So in order to deploy my application, I'm going to need some VMs or some instances, EC2 instances on Amazon to run this on. So I don't go to Amazon and set up any of that stuff, right? I don't want to go to Amazon. I freaking hate Amazon's user experience, right? So I'm just going to stay right here in the Docker Cloud and say, you know what? I want to create a new cluster of nodes. Okay? These are going to be, every node in a cluster is going to be an Amazon EC2 instance. Okay? That's what node, EC2 instance, that's the same thing, right? So we'll call this like MuraCon 2017 is my new node cluster. I want to spin that cluster of servers up on Amazon. And I want to run it in the west region of Amazon. And I want to run this micro instance. Okay, that's what I want my clusters to be built out of, are these micro instances so that it's on the free tier and I don't get in trouble. And then I can say how many nodes do I want, right? Well, I could 10 nodes, 100 nodes, whatever you want to go to here, right? For right now, in order to keep this free, I'm going to leave this as one node. Just know that you can make this number whatever you want. You don't need to change your application unless you're storing stuff in session scope, whatever. But if you have an application that's able to be load balanced across servers, right, you can spin this number of nodes up to as many numbers of nodes as you'd like, right? And what that means is we're going to stand up a series of VMs that are going to service requests, and it's going to figure out how to balance all that stuff. When things go away, it's going to throw them away and build new ones, and it just takes care of it. You don't have to think about it, right? So I'm going to say, okay, T2 micros, let's go. Let's launch this node cluster. Oh, we're deploying a cluster of one. Deploying a cluster of one on Amazon. You can come over here. I have 0 running instances. Let's see if I look at my instances here, though. Hopefully. I guess it hasn't communicated yet. So this might take a minute. Okay, so it's going to deploy those servers over there. So the servers are just the infrastructure that your services run on. Okay, don't think of a node as being, hey, my container maps to a node. It doesn't, right? The nodes are just there as an infrastructure for it to be able to compute. Okay. What I need to do, and in fact I can open this up. I should have shown this more like this. So what I need to do is launch actual applications here. Okay. Now you could come in here and launch a single container. You can launch a service. So now this whole part of what's a service and what's a container, we'll talk about in a second. But for the point of this discussion, right? Let's just create a stack because I've already done that for you. And what a stack does is it kind of works like your Docker Compose file, right? If we come back over here and we look at your Docker Compose file, right? This described, hey, I want to run both Mura and MySQL, right? On the real estate example, right? We were running Mura and Elasticsearch and MySQL, right? So very similarly to the Docker Compose files, you can have what's called a stack file. And a stack file is used to tell Docker Cloud how you want it to run, how you want your stack to run, what services you want to run, okay? So I've already put into this Mura Docker project under the deploy folder a production YAML file here. And this format is almost identical to Docker Compose. And in fact, I think Eddie just told me that version 3 of Docker Compose is actually universal. It works both. It's one file, one ring to rule them all. Okay. So I can take this. I can come over here. I can say I want to create a stack. I want to call this MuraCon 2017. Paste that in there. If I had more services, if there were more services here, it would just be here. Okay, so let's see how, actually before I create this, let's open up, let's see if my node has been deployed yet. Give me 1 second. Deployed, fantastic. Okay, so this was my node cluster, MuraCon 2017 is deployed. By the way, even if it's already deployed, I can come up here and scale it, right? So I can scale it automatically. Or I mean, I can come in here and scale it manually. My node cluster is comprised of a single node. That single node can be viewed over here. Oh, it's not because I need to be in US West, Northern California. That's where I missed before. And Okay, this is that EC2 instance. But remember, I don't ever need to come in here and think about this stuff, right? So fantastic, my cluster is there. And now what I want to do is come back here and go ahead and say create and deploy. Doesn't matter how many services I have. What? Devil gods. All right, let's see what we got here. So that happens. You'll probably run into very similar issues. That's why I wanted to show this. Okay. So why didn't that run? Well, let's figure it out. All right, so I've got my MuraCon 2017 stack. It says it's not running. Well, let me try and start it again. What? Error? All right, let's look at the timeline. Why is this not working? Create. All right, let me look at my stack file. So what this is saying, when you look at the stack here, it's like, here's my stack. Here are my services. So let me open up that Mura service. Looks like it's going to come from Greg Moser, Mura Docker Protect. Wait a minute. Let's look at our. So remember that in order for the stack to work, it's got to grab an image from somewhere, right? And remembering back to this image step, right? So this was like, you think of Docker Hub like GitHub, right? It just holds repositories of these containers for you. Okay, so I do have a build up there. Docker project _ Mura : production. Greg Moser, Mura Docker project, is that what I called it? _ Mura : production. So let's try and start this service. Not running. And a phone call at the same time, so embarrassing. All right, let's see what's going on here. So it's not running, let's figure out why. Let's look at the logs. What did I miss? Or my JVM? Sorry, guys. Let's try this one. There is no reason this should not have run. Are there any questions so far with what I've talked about while I debug this? Anybody? Okay. So, I don't want to spend too much time on this. I'm sure it's like a stupid semicolon I missed somewhere. I will fix the repo so that when you do this, it works. But I want to continue the talk. So,
Actually, I do have one question. If you don't
yeah,
mind.
go ahead.
For Docker Cloud, do you know the pricing per instance?
So Docker Cloud doesn't charge you per instance.
Okay.
Docker Cloud basically charges you like a management fee.
Sure.
So they're like, you can think of Docker Cloud as being sort of like the broker that says like, oh, go out and get these servers over here and then deploy stuff on it.
Yeah.
So they charge you, it's a relatively, I don't know how expensive it is, to be honest. It's not, I think it's like $10 a month or something nominal, trivial. Yeah, and then you can do like some number of projects at that price point. I mean, it's scalable. I don't know, whatever. But remember, this Docker Cloud is what you can think of as sort of like an orchestration tool. Mm-hmm. So it's basically saying, you know, when these new builds show up on Docker Hub, go and put them out on the server and manage those servers. There's lots of CI tools you can use. You don't need to use Docker Cloud to do this stuff with. And you also don't need to use Docker Hub to put your images in. Right? Just like GitHub is not the only place to store repositories of Git projects. There's all sorts of private Docker registries. So like Amazon has their own Docker registry, and everybody's got their own Docker registries, right? And the Docker registry is like a Docker Hub, or is like Docker Hub. Okay, so at the end of the day, what you end up with in your Docker project and my readme's all in here. Where is my service? Oh wait. Ha! That's right. That's why it's not working. I already had it running. This is the challenge of pre-demoing. All right, let me stop that. I'm gonna try this one more time. Oh, that's better. Yes, yes, yes. Fantastic. Okay, great. So my service is running. I can come in here. I can see my service running. It's running on a single container right now, but I have a Mura service, and the service itself can be scaled. So what does that mean? So I've got a cluster of servers, right? And I could say, well, I want my service to run on one container. That container can only ever live on one server at a time. So you got a cluster of 3 servers. You probably want to have at least 3 containers in your container cluster, basically. Anybody want to talk about scaling? Call me afterwards. Outside the scope of this talk. It will do it all for you automatically, and it'll all be just listed here. And then at the end of the day, your service, this beautifully load balanced thing that has fault tolerance and auto deployment and no downtime, right? You end up with a service endpoint, which you can take right here and put into your browser and render, and come on, yay! My project is now up on the cloud, right? Break for applause. Woo! All right. So there we go. As a new developer, right? I mean, there's no smoke and mirrors here. We're 40 minutes into this presentation, right? I could have started with a fresh Mac laptop, just downloaded a project, and deployed it in Amazon, fully scalable, all point and click. I mean, if you don't love this stuff, I don't know what's wrong with you. I mean, this is amazing, amazing, amazingly easy stuff to do, right? It can become amazingly complicated. And most Docker talks start with the complicated stuff. But the point I wanted to bring was, you guys saw this, it's not hard, right? I fumbled my way through this when I first did it. So this is all up and running, and that's great, that's fantastic. Cool. I can, the last thing that I wanted to show before we take off is, all right, I'm working on this project. Let me go ahead and pull it up again on my local host now because I want to make some changes. So I'm actually going to set up that MySQL database. I don't need to create a new database because my container did it for me. I do need to give it a name, my password, my local dev. Oops. What was my password again? No, protection not secure. Local dev not secure. That's what it is. Okay. So this is back on my local machine. All right. I need to create a default username for myself. Password. Email. Next. Okay. I'm just going to leave the vanilla Mura stuff in place. And then, all right, great. Installation complete. Let's log in. Now, when I did this process, Mura went out and created a bunch of database tables, created a user for me, right? And I'm logging into it now. But once I'm logged in, right, I'm working on this project. I probably want to add some extended attributes. I probably want to add some content. So some of the work that I do is going to be done in this screen, right, where I come in here and I say, okay, I need to come in and change my my default include themes. I'm going to add some CSS stuff in here and do whatever I want to do down here. And then some of the work that I'm going to do is going to be in the Mura admin, right? Setting up extended attributes, setting up content, all of that kind of stuff, right? But a couple months go by, and I'm no longer the only person working on this project, right? Ray J, my partner here, he needs to jump into the project and work on it with me as well. Well, good news is, Ray J goes to the same Git repo that I used to get set up in the first place, right? He clones it down himself. But, if he started with a fresh Mura instance, it wouldn't be very productive. With just the theme changes, that wouldn't be very helpful. So, another thing that I do, there's lots of ways to pass data around, right? I could say, for example, instead of using a local MySQL container, right? I could just come up here and say, you know what, this is like our dev.mysql.wearecool.com, right? We've got this MySQL server that's sitting up there in the cloud somewhere so that my local Mura talks to a cloud MySQL server. It's in RDS or wherever you want to put it, right, on whatever port. Same, just usernames and passwords. So then we're connecting to the same one, but sometimes that's slow, right? Especially if the database is in New York and you're in San Diego, and the database is huge, like Scientific Americans, and you got to pull data in and out of it all the time. It's really painful. So sometimes you want to just work locally, right? It's just faster. So the other thing that's really cool with this setup and what MySQL provides, and remember, so we only really looked at this first run setup. The other thing I put in here for you guys is a little bit of information about how to stop running services, how to start services, right? And you can also start services like just one-offs. You don't have to start the whole stack. Oh, that was the other thing I didn't show you before, because there's like a little bit of voodoo going on in here, and you're like, wait, I want to get into my server and see what's going on in there, right? Even on my local host. So when this was running here, right, I've got a MySQL and the Mura containers running on my local machine. I can come over here and just say docker compose execute on Mura bash. Okay, I want to execute that command on Mura. And what that's going to do is going to bring me up the bash prompt inside of that container. So I am now in that container, right? This is like a Linux, I don't even know what what flavor of Linux the default Lucy container runs on, but here I am, I'm in the full thing, right? I can like see into my opt Lucy folder and see everything in here, jump into server and Lucy server and get at my logs and everything that's going on, but it's all compartmentalized inside of that one container. So the MySQL stuff is over in its container, the Lucy stuff is over in its container, and you can access both of them. So instructions on how to access those containers are right here, right? And so that whole docker compose execute Mura bash, we've got sort of execute, bash command. But it could be the tail command, it could be a lot of commands. So for example, if I wanted to like take a snapshot of my database, right? There's tools to do that. In fact, MySQL comes with a tool called MySQL dump. Has anybody ever used MySQL dump before? One person. Boring group. All right. So MySQL dump is a command, and in fact, if I go back to this README, I've even said there's some important stuff to read in here, so I would read through it before you start using this. It's not long. Try to keep it as short as possible. So we got this notion of taking data snapshots. Well, remember that the whole new paradigm is don't install anything on your machine. Run everything in containers, right? So if I need to run a MySQL dump command, it's not like I open up MySQL and go in and dump it. I mean, I could do that, but it's much easier to just say, hey, docker compose, execute against the MySQL server this MySQL dump command. Right? So that's sort of further use of this. So I can copy this. And I can actually, let's exit out of this crazy thing I was doing, clear this all so we're back into plain vanilla, Murator, paste the command that was in there that somebody told me to run. Wait, oh, it's because it's got an enter at the end of it. Hold on 1 second, guys. There we go. Run that command. What did that do? So we've got a MySQL, we've got it now in our MySQL container. MySQL has this really cool thing built into its container that you can read about on their hub page. And it's called this Docker entry point initdb, right? And if you've ever looked at a MySQL dump file, they look like this, right? They're just, a big, there's a bunch of SQL statements, essentially, that gets the database to where it needs to be, right? So you can dump that file into this Mura, in this directory, and then, so I can save this, right? Get out of this, don't save that. Let's go back to my little thing here. I'll go back to my running servers. I can kill my servers. In fact, take them all the way offline. Docker compose down talks about this in the README. It totally deletes everything that was ever done with those containers, just like they're gone, right? And then when I do a Docker compose up the next time, because I have this SQL file in here, it automatically gets instantiated when the MySQL container loads, when it boots. So that will just run against the database, right? Even though I just threw away all the database data, since this file's here, this runs, it spins up, I can go back and do just localhost, and my admin account will already be there, right? And like the setup stuff will already be in the database and everything's there because it booted from that file. So think of it this way. Now, if I commit, and we'll talk about this in a second, but just pretend for a second that I committed, right, that file to the repo. So I come over here and I say, all right, here's my MySQL like initial data, commit, and I push that up, right? This data never goes up to production because remember in production we're not running a MySQL container in production. We're not instantiating anything. We're using RDS. It's just for you to be able to kick around snapshots internally, right? So now I can work on this. I can commit this data, say, hey, Ray J, pull it down. When he fires it up this time, it's going to have all my data in there, right? It's all ready to go, right? He can go obliterate stuff, change data, however, not dump his new data changes, drop his containers, start him up again, and he's good to go. Or he goes, you know what, everybody in our company is going to need? We're all going to need these 5 new extended attributes I'm going to create. So he'll boot it up, go in, create the 5 extended attributes, dump using that command, dump that export, commit it to the branch that he's working on, right? Because he's doing some new feature for the website. And then everybody that's working on that branch with him, when they spin up that branch, those 5 extended attributes will be there already, right? And a really good place to do this is actually, in fact, Ryan gave a really good talk on this. Or in Ryan's talk, last year he talked about this whole notion of production always being right. So you don't have to just take data snapshots from local, right? I could go out to production, and all I got to do is change this command to say the host is this server is where I'm dumping from, right? And I can dump out my production database, right? And store that against the Git repo so that now when everybody boots it up local, they got a fresh copy of production, right? Really, really cool, right? Sharing data, awesome. Okay, cool. I think I'm up on time, and that was my last bit. So thank you guys all so much for coming. Questions? Anybody got questions about anything that we talked about here today? Yeah.
I'm totally new to Docker, so
Sure.
I'm not familiar with things. But on our dev machines, we're using IIS to serve them up, and we're using like the rewrite module.
Yep.
So could we still do that?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, no, it's a really good question. And I know it's kind of like, wait, what? How does this work, and where do these things go, and all of that kind of stuff. So one thing to keep in mind is everything that we talked about here today was running on Linux, okay? And Docker uses a native Linux sort of whatever. So on your dev machines, you're using IIS right now, right? And you're using that rewrite module. So one of the things, Microsoft has actually brought Windows to containers. So you can now do Microsoft in containers. And I believe they have IIS in Linux now as well, or in those Windows containers. I've never done it, but essentially, like, I can show you the equivalent in any of our projects, right? Like we, in our DevOps thing here, in this Apache service, we come in here and we do all sorts of, defining our vhosts and doing our HTTP configs. So anything that you can do basically in configuration files, you can do. And most languages and services and stuff like that have all moved to like a file-based configuration structure. So you can drop in that like web.config file. I haven't used IIS in a long time. Web.config file. Yeah, and so if you have that web.config file in your folder, pick it up, work, no problem, right? So it's all good to go. I just haven't done a lot with IIS, but it's a really good question. And for such a question, you get a Slapwall hoodie. Anybody else have a question? Questions are showing up all of a sudden.
Well, some people are interested.
I think there's a medium in there.
Yeah, I see it. There you go.
Hopefully you can correct or confirm my understanding of the way Docker kind of works.
Sure.
Because a lot of people will try to say, how is this like a virtual machine in some way? And
Right.
the way that I understand it is that it has a lot of the benefits of the virtual machine without having to run all the other OS crap. It's basically just the toolkit and the services and the programs that run within it without everything else on top of it.
Yeah,
Is that right?
Basically right, yeah. So what ends up happening, the way that Docker works is you have a base Linux machine, and Linux added this notion of containerization, and Docker just leverages that native Linux containerization. And basically what it says is, hey, here's the base OS with everything that you need to like run from a Linux perspective that just sits here and runs, and then each one of these containers that stands up only needs to do, is completely compartmentalized and only needs to do the service part, like just the JVM or just MySQL or just that one single process essentially, and it gives you whatever flavor of Linux you want to run or whatever flavor of OS you want to run, and you get a full OS there, but there's no overhead of that full OS being there, right? That's why all of this was so fast, right? Because you can ship this stuff around, and we can definitely get into a more in-depth conversation about how all that stuff works, but that your basic premise is correct, right? It's just like a really stripped down, from a file system perspective, your whole OS is there, but from a server and processing perspective and overhead and size perspective, it's just that one sliver of vertical that it needs to run on. And the way Docker works is it's built on a series of layers. So like that Lucy container that I did was based on a Tomcat container, which was based on a Java container, right? So like there's a base Java container, and that gets extended by Tomcat's container, right? And that's an independent container that's out there that you can run. And then Lucy took that and added Lucy to it. And then I took it and added Mura to it. And then, and so on and so forth, right? So it's an extendable architecture. And what's cool about that is, let's say I've got a project, right? Or let's say I've got 100 projects, and they're all running Mura. And they're all running, I want them all to run on the same version of Lucy, right? That first Java is the same. The Tomcat is always the same. The Lucy is always the same. So when I run those 100 sites on 100 different JVMs, right, it's not actually replicating all of that stuff. All that stuff gets cached. So when I spin up my new project, it doesn't need to build all of that. It just needs to build the last little incremental addition to the server. Does that make sense?
I think so.
Okay. Yeah, you get ahead. I think there's a large over this.
There you go, man.
Question I think is back here.
Yeah, and I wasn't understanding how I think I missed something on how you're using that DevOps folder. I was wondering if you could just quickly elaborate how you're...
Yeah, so it's pretty cool. So what we do on the DevOps side of things, and it definitely would warrant sort of a longer talk, because you can get once you think of your whole infrastructure as code, right, and it's all just in here, and you can do anything, right? And so, we're developers, so things tend to get built out, right? A little bit more than the Hello World example. So what we've done here in the DevOps container is we have this sort of global sense of everybody in our organization clones down the DevOps container, or DevOps infrastructure, if you will, right? So that we know that everybody's development machine works the same way. So like changes that RayJ makes or Gibbs make, their machines aren't going to work differently, which is really important. And also it matches what's going to run up on the server, right? And actually this is kind of a good set. And so then what we do is in this DevOps project, we literally clone DevOps right into the root of your machine, so it's like user, Greg Moser, DevOps. And then in that DevOps Git repo, each of these individual projects, there's a git ignore in here to just ignore these projects so that they're managed in their own Git repositories, basically. And we just clone each one of those individual projects down, like the Slatwall project, right? So the Slatwall project is up on GitHub. We clone it down right into here, right? And what we've done is we have a base Docker Lucy 4 container that we run that says like, this is what it's gonna run like in production, right? We wanna start with like, hey, this is our server in production. And then if you look here in the services of our Lucy 4, we take our, we store our containers actually up in the Amazon registry basically, but we take our Lucy 4 container, and then everything that you see after here is all about making it like kind of more Debbie, right? Because when this stuff goes up to production, we want one project, one Lucy instance running on that Lucy 4. But here we want to go in and make some adjustments to the way, we're not making a lot of adjustments, right? It's like whatever, 19 lines in here. But essentially what we've done is we've created some really cool scripts that automatically parse the projects folder and set up each one of those projects as host names. and then it automatically maps it all so that it's like, cf9.slatwall. whatever, and I can go to, and like we have all of these settings, like we look at the Docker Compose for us when we spin up those services, right? We've got our like AWS keys that we need to connect to AWS, and then we've also got like different ports, right? So you can go directly through Apache or through this way or through that way, right? So that's what we do on top of that to basically make a little container environment to run the projects in, basically. And I really think that our DevOps thing is awesome. This whole, it does a lot of really cool stuff. And this is the other thing, right? If you're doing CSS or something like that, or you're doing less or whatever, and you need a less compiler or a JavaScript compiler or whatever, that should just be a service in your infrastructure that all devs get, and then when you do your Docker Compose up, it just listens to the same project folders, right? So everything just kind of works, right? So this whole DevOps project is definitely something that if there's interest in it and people like this talk and want to use Docker and have questions about it and we want to do more like sort of globally shared DevOps type of style, happy to take our learning from this and share it with the community and get things going. We just, in this particular one, we've got a lot of like 1024 specific sort of like, we've made a decision on Elastic Beanstalk, right? I don't want to make that decision for everybody else, right? And so there's tooling in here for Elastic Beanstalk, right? So that's kind of how we use it. But at the end of the day, and this is the most important part, right? So I was talking before about this whole notion, right? So for us, is anybody here, oops, DevOps is the wrong one. That's somebody else, wait, DevOps. Is anybody here in charge of like onboarding new developers? Anybody like ever have to train up a new developer or get them set up before? Okay, so when we onboard new developers, we say, go to GitHub, here's the DevOps repo, follow the first run setup. Now ours is a little bit more complicated, right? So cd into the directory, you gotta add your AWS credentials to a little environment file so that it knows how to talk to the CI. But it's not, it's 10 steps and you get it done in about a minute. And if your developer cannot follow these steps, probably not the right developer for your organization, right? So, it is just, hey, do these things and you're up and running, right? And everybody's up and running the same way. You don't have to remember how Bob set up his machine versus Larry set up his machine. So this part of it is all of the auto scaling, easy to deploy, easy to run in CI, all that stuff is awesome. This is like, oh my God. Somebody stole my Mac, right? I needed to get a new Mac. And I got all these projects that I have to work on. They were all on my old Mac or my old PC, right? Just do the steps again. Brand new Mac, 2 minutes. And your whole infrastructure is there again. Right? And that's really that's why I say, if you haven't learned Docker, if you haven't gotten into the Docker flow yet, this is why it is taking over. This is why you've heard about it from so many organizations and so many people talking about it. And it's not even just Docker, it's just containers in general, and this mindset of infrastructure as code and sharing infrastructure that way, because I think you guys can all understand how much improvement you have in the onboarding process by doing this. And then we just say, hey, here's all the stuff, right? Again, same instructions to that brand new developer, stop. Here's how you add one of our projects, right? You go to our 1024 repo, you cd into the DevOps project folder, you clone it down, that's it, right? And it just does it. So just having this single README file that's 100 lines long and being able to onboard new developers with all of our infrastructure. Any other questions? Oh yeah, you get a hoodie or something. I don't know if we have any more hoodies. Yeah, you got something. Anybody else? Any other questions? All right, we're up on time, guys. Have a great lunch. Thank you all.